Chapter 315, Graduate Brog, leader of the Black Barbarians, looked like a child caught in the act, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I apologize, my lord. I was in such a hurry that I forgot," he stammered. "Do it again. I'll watch." Dewey wasn't angry. He waved his wand and summoned a spare cauldron and another set of potion ingredients. He refused to believe that anyone couldn't make a basic boil-cure potion. Another half-hour passed. Everyone else had finished their potions. Quality varied, but most were marginally acceptable. Dewey watched as Brog presented his second attempt, a pungent, yellow-green liquid that smelled unmistakably wrong. He inhaled once and asked quietly, "Brog, what is this?" Brog eyed his normally composed lord with something like fear and answered cautiously, "A boil-cure potion." Dewey's temple twitched. He suddenly understood how Professor Snape must have felt. Constantly dealing with students like this would make anyone irritable. Still, seeing Brog's anxious expression, Dewey could only sigh and wave his hand. "Fine, that'll do. Just don't blow up the cauldron again, or you'll be buying your own." It was clear, Brog, the fiercest warrior among them, was a hopeless cauldron killer with no talent for potions. The only consolation was that, aside from Brog, none of the students had made any catastrophic mistakes. Their brews were impure, but technically successful. Dewey wasn't surprised. These were adults, far more reliable than first years at Hogwarts. Out of 543 students, more than 300 portions of boil-cure potion were usable. Dewey put them all in the infirmary for future use, and with these students as assistants, felt confident he wouldn't be short of supplies. Dewey also taught transfiguration. Talent varied. Some mastered transformations quickly. He made a mental note of promising students to cultivate further. The magic crash course was brutal. 4 classes in the morning, 4 in the afternoon, 2 in the evening, each 50 minutes, an intensity more like cramming for university entrance exams than leisurely schooling. The aim was to pack 1st through 7th year magical knowledge into the shortest possible time so these students could strengthen rapidly. With so many classes, Dewey couldn't, and didn't want to, teach everything himself. Most lessons were handled by the portraits. They contained the necessary knowledge and memories. Dewey appeared in class only for the riskier subjects to supervise and prevent accidents. To his surprise, the cauldron-challenged Brog excelled in charms, particularly in offensive spells. A handful of students showed talent in herbology as well. Time flew. A year passed, and it was March 2950. The intensive course was drawing to a close. The students were about to graduate. Over the year, they had endured relentless study, supported by energy and exhilaration potions, and by water from Hildorian, the human homeland, said to eliminate fatigue and invigorate the spirit. Some pushed themselves to the brink. Others thrived in the competition. By the end, most could perform common charms and wield magic at the level of ordinary wizards. Their final assessment was apparition, supervised by Dewey and Arwen. On the castle's wide lawn, Dewey drew 2 circles on the grass and instructed students to apparat from one to the other. Instant transportation captivated everyone, so they volunteered eagerly, though with wildly different results. Some lost only an eyebrow, a lock of hair, or a fingernail. Others fared worse. A missing finger, a mangled ear. The most terrifying cases were split. Half a body would appear in the other circle, while the other half remained behind. Onlookers went pale. The person who had splinched screamed, convinced they were about to die. "Ah, I'm going to die! I don't want to die!" "Calm down, it's just splinching. You won't die," Dewey said, oddly unflustered. He waved his wand, reconnected the 2 halves, and healed the wound with practiced efficiency. The young man stared at his reassembled body in astonishment and relief. Everyone else watched in dumbfounded awe. What would have been fatal for ordinary people was now a minor, fixable accident. The spectacle only deepened their respect for magic and their determination to master it. Dewey had Arwen comfort the splinched student to prevent psychological trauma, then resumed the training. After 3 months of practice, every student had learned to apparate. The magic crash course officially graduated. Dewey had plans for the new graduates. Bill, who had inherited Dewey's knack for wandcraft, became an official wand maker. Dewey also chose and trained a talented student in broomstick making. That student would be responsible for crafting brooms and helping form Quidditch teams, perhaps even running a Quidditch Cup someday. A small group of older students were put in charge of a flue powder production workshop to manage its operations. Several students with talent in potions and herbology stayed on for advanced study, tending the herb garden and producing potions for the castle. Finally, from the remaining students, Dewey selected 100 outstanding individuals to form an Auror unit. Led by Brog, the Black Barbarians' leader, they would become Dewey's special forces, responsible for protecting Hogsmeade, Bree, and Isengard, handling serious magical incidents beyond ordinary folk, pursuing and apprehending enemies, and repelling invaders. Chapter 315, The Ministry of Magic. When the students of the Magic Crash Course graduated, they left the castle one after another and returned to their hometowns. Hogsmeade, Bree, and Isengard suddenly came alive. Everyone knew that the more than 500 people who had been chosen had gone to the Lord's castle, successfully become wizards, and stayed to learn magic. Now that they were returning, curiosity and expectation ran high. The first new organization to appear was the Department of Aurors. The Auror headquarters was established in Hogsmeade, with Brog appointed director, and branches set up in Bree and Isengard. Aurors do not handle ordinary civic affairs and are not under the mayor's authority. Their role is to respond to invasions by dark creatures, ghouls, orcs, trolls, and to manage magical incidents and crimes committed by wizards. With 500 new wizards now roaming the land, and more to come, Duir could not guarantee that none of them would misuse their power. Even a sharp blade can breed murderous intent. A wand is far more dangerous. To curb potential recklessness, Duir created the Department of Aurors, a sword of Damocles hanging over every wizard's head. Duir also established the Department of Magical Transportation, responsible for building and operating the flue network, producing flue powder, managing port keys, and overseeing other magical modes of travel. The department was small, only a dozen employees in total, including those Duir had taught to make flying brooms. Its headquarters shared a building with the Auror office, a tall black tower on the shore of the Black Lake. The tower had been constructed in a single day by over 500 wizards working together, and during construction it remained hidden from ordinary folk by concealment charms. Only those with magic could see the tallest building in Hogsmeade standing by the lake. Duir named the tower the Ministry of Magic and patterned its internal layout after a ministry from another magical world. The first floor was the main hall, a lobby and reception area with many fireplaces, security desks, and a fountain. In the center of the fountain stood a golden dragon statue. On its back was an image of Duir wearing the crown of wisdom, a magnificent cloak, and holding a wand. The statue had been cast in gold, contributed by the 500 wizards as a token of gratitude to their lord. The second floor housed the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, including the Auror headquarters, the judicial arm. The third floor contained the Department of Magical Transportation with the Flue Network Administration, the Broom Regulatory Authority, and the Port Key Office. The fourth floor was the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, currently focused on managing dragons at the Dragon Farm. The fifth floor handled international magical cooperation, liaison work with other nations and races, strengthening ties with elves, dwarves, humans, hobbits, ents, and others to counter Sauron's forces. The sixth floor oversaw magical games and sports, including Quidditch leagues. The seventh floor was the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, charged with resolving unexpected magical incidents. The eighth floor housed the courtroom for criminal trials. The ninth floor was the Department of Mysteries, devoted to research into magical phenomena and experiments. The 10th and top floor was reserved for Duir and the Minister of Magic's office. For now, only the departments of Aurors and Magical Transportation were active. Most other floors remained empty. Duir was not in a hurry. The ministry would be completed as the wizard population grew. With the 500-plus wizards returning home, the Department of Magical Transportation became busy. Besides producing flue powder, its staff traveled to set up special fireplaces for wizard families applying to join the flue network. Once connected, a household would only need flue powder to travel through fireplaces. A month's supply, a large scoop sufficient for a family, could be bought from the ministry for one sickle. Currency became a separate problem. Middle-earth's coinage was chaotic. Gondor used castar, also called canas, as silver coins and mirian as gold, plus brass and copper denominations. Rohan had similar coins. Elves and dwarves used their own unique money. West of the Misty Mountains, in Eriador, coins from Gondor, dwarves and elves circulated freely. In Bree, old Arnor coinage was still in use. Values varied widely. Dwarf silver coins, containing mithril, were worth far more than ordinary silver and even outvalued common gold. Elven coins, exquisitely crafted and rich in silver, were also worth more than Gondor's. Arnor's coinage had collectible value that ordinary currency did not. Merchants and citizens who didn't know these differences were easily cheated in trade, and foreign caravans complicating transactions only made life harder. Mayors Luke and Ratch reported the mess to Duir. Duir's solution was to found a bank and issue a standardized wizarding currency. He adopted the familiar names Galleon, Sickle, and Nut, but simplified the exchange for Middle-earth. Rather than the complex rates of the other magical world, Duir set 1 galleon equals 10 sickles, and 1 sickle equals 10 nuts. The coins were minted using goblin craftsmanship, beautiful, durable, and imbued with minor enchantments, so they never tarnished and always gleamed. A white marble bank called Gringotts soon rose in Hogsmeade, and the new wizarding currency was eagerly welcomed by the citizens of Hogsmeade and Bree. Everyone traded their various gold, silver, and copper coins for the galleons, sickles, and nuts issued by Gringotts. Mayor Luke of Hogsmeade, Mayor Ratch of Bree, Buttercup the innkeeper of the Leaping Horse, and many others deposited their savings at Gringotts to show support for the Lord. Traveling merchants readily accepted the new wizarding currency. Its high purity, fine craftsmanship, and obvious quality made it both a practical medium of exchange and a desirable collectible. Before long, galleons, sickles, and nuts circulated throughout Eriador, reached Gondor and Rohan, and even turned up in lands under Sauron's influence, among the Easterlings in the Far East. Gringotts in Middle-earth was not run by goblins, but by wizards. Though relatively independent, it remained subject to the Ministry of Magic. Most of the wizards were assigned to posts in the Ministry or at Gringotts, Aurors, employees of the Department of Magical Transportation, bank staff, and so on. A small number of the most talented stayed at Hogwarts to pursue advanced crafts, wand-making, potion-making, herbology, broom production. The rest returned to their homes and applied their new skills in ordinary life. Rose, a skilled weaver from Hogsmeade, had learned magical weaving from Arwen. Back home, she opened Madame Rose's robe shop, where magic allowed her to weave exquisite fabrics at speed and tailor garments with an elven grace. She even brought in spider silk cloth woven by giant spiders and turned it into sumptuous, impenetrable clothing that, though costly, proved popular with nobles in Rohan and Gondor. As her magic deepened, she acquired dragonhide from the castle and fashioned garments with limited spell resistance, warding off ordinary charms, earning her renown as a master tailor. Buttercup returned to the Leaping Horse and prospered. During his year at Hogwarts, he finally mastered the recipe for butterbeer and introduced it at his inn. A mildly alcoholic, butterscotch-like drink, suitable for all ages and wildly popular from Bree to the Shire, Rivendell, Gondor, and beyond. He also invented fire whiskey, a potent magical liquor that left a burning warmth through the body, dispelled cold, steadied courage, and comforted the grief-stricken. Northern men and dwarves took to it eagerly, importing it by the galleon, making Buttercup one of Bree's wealthiest men. Buttercup's other creations, giggle water that caused silly laughter, pepper-up potion to invigorate, fizzing whiz-bees that filled the air with bubbles, were hits in their own right. His proudest achievement, however, was a wine brewed with dragon blood. Rare and produced in tiny quantities, it enhanced both physical strength and magical power. It became an exclusive vintage at Hogwarts banquets and a symbol of Buttercup's success. Elsewhere, under Dewey's guidance, clever wizards reproduced sweets from another world, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, chocolate frogs, fizzing whiz-bees, and broom production ramped up. In Bree, Hogsmeade, and even Isengard, it was not unusual to see people flying on brooms, drawing awe and envy from the crowds below. 10 years passed. It was now the year 2960. On his old friend Bilbo's birthday, Dewey presented him with a bottle of the elixir of life to mark his 70th year. The elixir kept Bilbo's appearance unchanged, only his eyes held a little more experience. He spent most days in the Shire enjoying breakfasts, second breakfasts, elevenses, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner, and supper, pottering in his garden, smoking his pipe, and reading newspapers. From time to time, he stepped through the fireplace to visit Hogwarts, where Dewey and Arwen always welcomed him. Dewey once asked if Bilbo wished to become a wizard. Bilbo merely smiled and declined. A took at heart and a contented Baggins by temperament, he was happy with his simple life. Dewey admired him all the more for it. Bilbo had already resisted the greatest of temptations and had now gently refused another. It was little wonder he had been the pivot of Middle-earth's fate. Over the decade, the original 500-plus wizards had settled into varied lives. Most were adults who had married and started families, wizards marrying other wizards or ordinary folk, and to everyone's surprise, their children all displayed innate magic. Encouraged by the Lord, almost every wizard family grew large. Many households now had 3 or more children. Dewey also conducted another selection and bloodline fusion, converting another 500 people into wizards. Altogether, his lands now counted nearly 3,000 wizards. One evening, Arwen placed a hand over her belly and smiled, her eyes bright as starlight. "Duir," she said, "congratulations on becoming a father." Chapter 318, Pregnant. Really? Dewey's eyes went wide in disbelief, his expression more alive than ever. Arwen, radiant with a quiet maternal glow, smiled and nodded. "It's been a month already. I only noticed it yesterday." Hearing that, Dewey was at once surprised and delighted. He reached out carefully to touch his wife's still flat belly and, using a little magic to sense within, felt faint but unmistakable stirrings of life. Joy overwhelmed him. A foolish grin spread across his face, and he cried out, "I'm going to be a father! I'm going to be a father!" He scooped Arwen up and spun her around a few times, exuberant but careful, chanting, "I'm going to be a father." Watching him grin like that, Arwen's face softened with love. She wrapped her arms around his neck and let him have his moment. Once the initial euphoria passed, Dewey regretted the rough handling. Like someone protecting a fragile treasure, he put her down and helped her sit, fretting softly. "No, you need to rest now. Put everything else aside. I'll stay by your side and never leave. We must tell Elrond and Galadriel and hire some caregivers. Ellensis is excellent with potions, and Amanda's healing magic is superb. We should invite them to the castle." Arwen found his frantic planning a little exasperating. "Dewey, I'm pregnant, not a fragile crystal," she soothed. "When my mother was expecting me, she even crossed the misty mountains to visit my grandparents in Lothlorien." Her calm words settled him down bit by bit. Dewey still intended to suspend his affairs and guard her every step, and he did summon Amanda, the finest healer he knew, and Ellensis, the most talented potion student, to the castle, just in case. Amanda and Ellensis had been among the first graduates of the magic crash course. Amanda had shown exceptional talent in healing magic and, on Arwen's recommendation, had studied medicine in Rivendell with Elrond. Over the 10 years since her graduation, she had mastered numerous healing spells and refined her medical skills to the point where even Dewey could not match her. Ellensis had been the most gifted at potions in that cohort. After graduation, she continued her studies at the castle, and with notes Dewey had from Professor Snape, had advanced rapidly. She could brew perfect high-level potions, and had even produced a cauldron of Felix Felicis. She was one step from becoming a potion master, the final leap being the invention or significant improvement of a potion, and was currently working on a new brew inspired by the Ent Draught. Beyond summoning Amanda and Ellensis, Dewey did not hesitate to share the news with Elrond in Rivendell and with Lord Celeborn and Lady Galadriel in Lothlorien. Elrond came immediately through the vanishing cabinet. Galadriel and Celeborn followed from Lothlorien. As Middle-earth's foremost physician, Elrond examined Arwen at once. As a father, he was both delighted and worried, but after the examination he breathed a relieved sigh and addressed his son-in-law gently and firmly. "Arwen is healthy, and the children are fine. You needn't be overly anxious." "That's good." Dewey felt a weight lift from his chest, but the next second his eyes widened. "You mean children?" Arwen's face showed the same surprise. Elrond smiled and nodded. "Yes, you're carrying twins. It's early, so it's not obvious yet." "Twins." Dewey's surprise turned to joy. He hadn't expected two so soon, a double blessing. Then he thought of family precedent. Elrond and Elros had been twins, and Arwen's brothers Elladan and Elrohir were twins as well. The family clearly had strong genes. Elrond grew serious. Elven pregnancies last 3 years, longer than human ones. The offspring steadily draw nutrition and magic from the mother. Twins place an even heavier burden on her, so we must avoid any accidents and ensure she receives sufficient nourishment and magical replenishment. When you return to Rivendell, I'll prepare potions suited for pregnant elves. As the pregnancy progresses, make sure she takes them regularly. I've noted it, Duir said, solemn and earnest, committing Elrond's instructions to memory. I'll do everything you say. Lady Galadriel, who had arrived, spoke then. They are both first-time parents and will need guidance. I will remain here until the child is born. Elrond and Duir welcomed her offer with visible relief. Thank you, Lady Galadriel, Elrond said sincerely. Galadriel shook her head and wrapped Arwen in a gentle, protective embrace. Arwen is my granddaughter. Now that Celebrian has sailed to the Blessed Realm, it falls to me to care for her. Duir had no parents of his own, and Arwen's mother, Celebrian, had indeed long since gone across the sea. There was no one else to take the maternal role but Galadriel. So Galadriel took up residence at Hogwarts Castle to care for Arwen nearby. After confirming his granddaughter's health, Celeborn did not linger. He returned to Lothlorien to keep watch, but he frequently sent elven foods, nutritional supplements, and other supplies. With Galadriel watching over Arwen, Elrond returned to Rivendell to prepare the necessary potions and supplements, but he came back to the castle regularly to check on her. Elladan and Elrohir, who had been traveling, hurried to the castle when they heard the news. Friends like Bilbo and Gandalf either came in person or sent gifts, and the people of the region celebrated their lady's pregnancy with lanterns and banners. Wizards raised their wands for magical fireworks, and gifts poured in. For a while, Bree, Hogsmeade, and even Isengard were alive with celebration. Chapter 319, The Pen of Acceptance and the Book of Admission. At Weathertop Castle, Galadriel and Arwen sat together on a high platform in a malorn tree. A gentle breeze stirred the golden leaves, and the setting sun bathed the castle in crimson light. Below, the city sparkled with magical fireworks. Galadriel looked at her granddaughter with fondness and said softly, Arwen, you seem to be doing well here. I am relieved. I think Celebrian would be pleased for you too. Arwen leaned against Galadriel, smiling radiantly. Grandmother, you needn't worry. Duir treats me well, and I am very happy here. She reached instinctively to her belly, her eyes warm and affectionate. And now I have a child. I will be a good mother and give them all the love and protection they need. As the days passed, Arwen's once flat stomach curved gently. Duir grew more anxious by the hour, hovering at his wife's side and scarcely daring to relax. He was taut with worry, more jumpy than Arwen herself. She could only sigh and try to comfort him. Galadriel, amused and a little exasperated, finally asserted her authority and firmly sent Duir away, ordering him to busy himself with other matters and leave Arwen in peace. Duir knew he was overdoing it and forced himself to step back, diverting his attention to governmental affairs. A decade of development had swelled the number of wizards in the territory to nearly 3,000. They clustered in Bree, Hogsmeade, and Isengard, and as their numbers grew, so did commerce. Wizarding markets formed. The largest market centered in Hogsmeade, where the wizard population was densest, and an entire street emerged. Duir named it Diagon Alley. Along Diagon Alley were shops for wands, robes, books, owls, potions, broomsticks, and flue powder. At the eastern end stood Gringotts Wizarding Bank, with 2 doors, one facing Hogsmeade's main street for ordinary folk to exchange and deposit galleons, sickles, and nuts, and a back entrance opening onto Diagon Alley for wizards. At the western end of Diagon Alley rose the Ministry of Magic Tower. The street bustled not only with wizards, but with dwarf and elf customers as well. Thanks to the Ministry of Magic's transportation department, the flue network had been expanded beyond the territory. Fireplaces in many regions of Middle-earth were linked, and flue powder sold widely across races and lands. The price was fair. 1 sickle bought a large scoop, enough for an ordinary household's monthly use. So many dwarves, elves, and humans had their hearths joined to the network. Busy owls crisscrossed Diagon Alley, delivering letters and parcels. Owing to Dewey, owls had become the favored messengers and pets of wizards, and almost every wizarding family now kept at least one. Mischievous children zipped along on toy broomsticks, prompting delighted cries and quick evasions from passersby. Meanwhile, the first generation of Magic Crash Course graduates had settled into family life and careers, and their oldest children were now 10. By the standard of the wizarding world, a child received their admission letter to a school of magic after turning 11, at which point they officially began formal magical education. Dewey did not intend to leave these children to grow up unguided. Adult wizards had varying strengths and specializations, and learning solely from a parent risked creating lopsided foundations. He therefore planned to establish Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry and to send admission letters to all eligible children when they turned 11. Unlike the ad hoc crash course, Hogwarts would offer structured instruction across 7 years, with courses arranged from basic to advanced. About a year from now, the first cohort would reach admission age. Although the ministry could compile the list of eligible students, Dewey preferred first to create 2 magical instruments central to Hogwarts' admissions: the Pen of Acceptance and the Book of Admission. The Pen of Acceptance is a magical quill that can detect children with magical gifts across Britain. When a child first displays magical ability, the pen flies from a silver inkwell and writes the child's name in the Book of Admission. The Book of Admission supervises the pen. It reviews the names written and refuses entries that lack sufficient proof of magic. For instance, a child who displayed a single magical outburst but later became a squib, originally magical but lost to the condition, would have their name removed so no pointless letter would be sent. Together, the pen and the book would select appropriately aged students for Hogwarts. Creating the 2 items was not difficult for Dewey now. The real question was their detection range. Hogsmeade and Bree lay relatively close to Hogwarts, but Isengard was thousands of miles away. Extending reliable detection across that distance would be no small feat. It covered the vast lands west of the Misty Mountains, territory even a Palantir could not fully oversee. Dewey also debated whether Hogwarts should recruit only from his territory or open to other races, elves, for example. Elves presented a particular problem because of their different growth rates. Elven children learn to speak and walk early and may appear like human 6- or 7-year-olds for many years. It is not until around 50 that an elf's body approaches the adult form they will carry through life, and full maturity may not come until a century or more. During his travels in Rivendell and Lothlorien, Dewey had seen elven children who looked 7 or 8 but were much older by human standards. Respecting the elves' traditional seclusion, Dewey planned to consult Lady Galadriel and Lord Elrond about whether their people wished to send their young to Hogwarts. If the elves preferred to remain apart, Dewey would confine Hogwarts admissions to the territory's young wizards and avoid overextending the pen's range. At most, he would place a small duplicate pen and book in Isengard to detect and register candidates in that distant region. Chapter 320, Admission Quota. When Dewey proposed opening a school of magic and accepting students, both Galadriel and Elrond welcomed the idea and asked that elven children be allowed to come to Hogwarts to learn. Elves are a magical people, but they do not cast spells in the same active theatrical way wizards do. Their power tends toward a subtler integration with the world, controlling natural forces, enchanting items, and communicating telepathically. Apart from ancient high elves like Galadriel and Elrond, who can call forth great magic, most elves rely more on exceptional bodies, exquisite martial skill, and enchanted weapons. Elf magic is older and more primitive, closer to the ancient magic of the wizarding world, slow, elaborate, and ritualized. A wand functions as a conduit, focusing and stabilizing the wielder's magic so it can be shaped into spells through the right words and gestures. That is true for elves as well. Arwen, Eladon, Elrohir, Legolas, and others all have wands made by Dewey and have learned to use them. With that enhancement, their power surpasses the typical strength of elves their age. In recent years, wand shops and Diagon Alley's reputation have drawn more elves to buy wands and the modest spellbooks sold there. Those books contain only basic magical theory and no advanced offensive spells, but the elves treasure them. Many now come back to the forests and hold an elven blade in one hand and a wand in the other. Lacking formal systematic magical education, they know only the simplest, most common spells. But even so, with their innate wisdom, they push those basic spells further than wizards might. One favorite is Lumos. Elves have refined its light into something resembling a holy light, a glow that wards and purifies darkness. Dewey was so impressed he recorded the elves' version as an upgraded Lumos in his grimoire. After Galadriel and Elrond agreed that elven children should be admitted to Hogwarts, Dewey began preparing the Quill of Acceptance and the Book of Admissions. To work for elves as well as humans, the instruments needed a detection range not only across Dewey's immediate lands, but out to Rivendell and Lothlorien beyond the Misty Mountains. In the other world, Hogwarts' instruments scan all of Britain, a relatively small nation compared to Middle-earth. Dewey wanted something that could sweep the entire continent. That ambition demanded extraordinary craft and immense magic. To anchor that power, Dewey reluctantly plucked a phoenix tail feather from himself for the quill. For the book, he used the toughest hide he could find, the core hide from a frost dragon. After 6 months of labor, a splendid golden and red quill and a thick, black dragon hide book lay on his bench. Dewey invited Galadriel, Elrond, and Gandalf to witness the enchantment. Dewey raised his wand and began to chant, pouring his magic into the two items. The phoenix quill and the dragon hide book rose and glowed, absorbing his power. At his side, Galadriel, Elrond, and Gandalf spread their hands. The 3 elven rings on the first two and the power of Gandalf's own subtle craft flared. 3 torrents of magic, vastly stronger than Dewey's alone, poured into the quill and the book. The items drank it in without resistance. Magic waves swelled around them, and an invisible force burst outward. The force was faint and secretive. At close range, the 4 could feel it, but any farther away, it would have been imperceptible. It crept through the castle, reached Hogsmeade beneath the mountain, and flowed on to Bree. The circle widened, sweeping across Eriador. Still it expanded, to the misty mountains in the east and south to Enedwaith. Unmoved by the mountains and chasms, it pressed through rock and shadow, stretching eastward over Rivendell and Lothlorien, across Mirkwood, the Lonely Mountain, the Iron Hills, and Dorwinion. To the south it touched Isengard, Rohan, Gondor, and even Mordor, Harad, and Khand. In Barad-dûr, Sauron's great eye turned west as if sensing a distant stirring. After the invisible field had nearly covered the entire continent, it finally stilled. Exhausted, Dewey lowered his wand and gulped air. Galadriel, Elrond, and Gandalf relaxed their hold on the rings. Without their aid, it would have been impossible to extend the range so far. Together, they had given Hogwarts a new, powerful relic. The Book of Admissions seemed suddenly alive, pulsing steady magic. It opened on its own to a blank page, and the Quill of Acceptance fluttered to it. Without ink, the quill wrote in a bright emerald hand, names, birth dates, and addresses, everything precise. Dewey scanned the list. It named young witches and wizards from Hogsmeade, Bree, and Isengard, and elven children from Rivendell, Lothlorien, Mirkwood, Lindon, even distant Dorwinion. Among the entries was Grim Beorn, the youngest son of Beorn the Skin Changer, of Beorn's house in the Anduin Valley. Born in 2950, Grim was 10 years old, just the right age for the first intake at Hogwarts. The quill recorded nearly every person across Middle-earth who showed magical aptitude. Not only children, but adults appeared too. Galadriel, Elrond, Gandalf. Even Sauron's name was there, faint and dim against the others, hardly more than a shadow on the page. Chapter 321, Professor Selection. The Pen of Acceptance seemed to accept everyone it detected with magic, but the Book of Admission was far stricter. It swallowed up the names of those who exceeded the enrollment age, recategorized applicants, and ranked them by the time of enrollment. The first page recorded the list of new students enrolling in September 2961. Aside from young wizards from the territory, there were also elven children, Dunedain, and skin changers, nearly 100 students in all. The Dunedain, descendants of the Númenóreans, were not only long-lived, living more than 3 times the span of ordinary humans, but also magical. Aragorn, who had been raised by Elrond and descended from Elros, possessed elven blood and unusual powers. In 2951, when Aragorn turned 20, Elrond revealed his lineage and entrusted him with 2 Arnorian heirlooms, the Ring of Barahir and the sword Narsil. At Elrond's request, Dewey personally crafted a wand for Aragorn. Aragorn attended Dewey and Arwen's engagement and wedding, and after coming of age, he left Rivendell to return to the northern Dunedain tribe. He officially inherited the chieftainship and began traveling Middle-earth as a ranger. The northern Dunedain lived in Eriador, acting in secret without fixed abodes. Other humans called them wanderers. As remnants of the old kingdom of Arnor, they felt a duty to guard its former lands and quietly maintain peace across Eriador. Since Dewey established his power on Weathertop, the region around that hill had enjoyed peace. Dark arts forces such as orcs no longer dared to invade. After the wizarding community and the Ministry of Magic were founded, Aurors based at Weathertop swept outward to clear all unstable elements, especially dark arts creatures. From the North Downs to the South Downs, from the Barrow Downs in the west to the Last Bridge in the east, the Aurors patrols extended across the region. Orcs, trolls, wargs, and other dark creatures were exterminated without mercy. Even the Trollshaws welcomed the cleansing. Most trolls were killed or driven into deep mountains and no longer came down to raid the roads. Many of those Aurors had been villagers. Dewey rescued from the trolls, so they bore a particular hatred and killed on sight. Except for a few that escaped into deep caves, the trolls of the Trollshaws were wiped out. The place that had once inspired dread fell silent. There were no more reports of trolls charging onto the east-west road to plunder travelers. The route from Weathertop to Rivendell became clear once again. With wizard Aurors guarding Eriador, the Dunedain had fewer opportunities to exercise their skills. Many of them withdrew to a river bend south of the Trollshaws, between the Horwell and Loudwater, to live in seclusion. Dewey noticed several Dunedain children in the Book of Admission listed at that river bend address. With the pen and book ready and the student list complete, Dewey turned to the teachers. It was midsummer of 2961, only a few months until the opening of the first Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, and the most urgent task was to find instructors. Following the Hogwarts model, Dewey planned the same first-year curriculum: transfiguration, charms, potions, history of magic, defense against the dark arts, astronomy, herbology, and flying. That meant at least 8 professors were needed. Those were only the compulsory first-year course. After the third year, students could choose electives: care of magical creatures, divination, ancient runes, arithmancy, alchemy, so more professors would be required later. For now, the priority was staffing the first-year posts. For potions, Dewey appointed Ellensis outright. She was unmatched in potioncraft. For the other posts, he opened applications, drawing candidates from graduates of the Magic Crash Course. For History of Magic, Dewey planned to use elf-compiled histories covering Middle-earth from the years of the lamps and years of the trees through the First and Second Ages to the present Third Age. The long-lived elves knew that lore best, so he intended to invite an elf as professor of history. Dewey issued a recruitment announcement, and wizards from Hogsmeade, Bree, and Isengard flocked to apply. Even Mayor Latch of Bree, Mayor Luke of Hogsmeade, and Brog, leader of the Black Barbarians, put forward their names. After rounds of assessment and selection, by early July, 8 professors had been chosen. Butler Edward beat a large field to become Transfiguration Professor. Luke resigned as Mayor of Hogsmeade to take the Charms post. Brog was chosen as Defense Against the Dark Arts Professor. Ellensis became Potions Professor. Margareth, who tended Dewey's garden and herb plots, took Herbology. To Dewey's surprise, Alpha, a Dunedain, won the astronomy position. Alpha held a respected place among the northern Dunedain. Dewey had first met him at the Leaping Horse Inn during the expedition to the Lonely Mountain and had once traded the White's ancient sword he'd recovered from the Barrow Downs to Alpha for many live herb plants. Alpha possessed magical talent. After the wand shop opened in Diagon Alley, he had acquired his wand there and bought magical books from the bookshop to study on his own. He used those books to master basic spells, then traveled between Hogsmeade and Bree to consult the first cohort of Magic Crash Course graduates. Through self-study and persistent effort, he surpassed many of the course's students. Coupled with his knowledge of astronomy, he beat out many competitors and won Dewey's approval for the astronomy chair. For the History of Magic post, Dewey had intended to hire an elder from Rivendell, but Arwen volunteered. Dewey glanced at Arwen's slightly swollen belly. She had been pregnant for a year and intended to refuse. Seeing the hopeful look in her eyes, he hesitated. Galadriel stepped in, persuading him to accept and offering to assist Arwen in teaching the class. Reluctantly, Dewey agreed. Dewey had planned to find a capable flyer to teach flying, but the matter resolved itself when Gandalf arrived at the castle, riding a flying broomstick. "Gandalf, are you really applying to be the flying professor?" Dewey asked in surprise. Chapter 322, College Dewey, was very surprised to learn that Gandalf had applied for the position of flying class professor. As far as he knew, Gandalf had always been a wanderer, roaming the western reaches of Middle-earth and never settling in one place. Why would he suddenly want a professorship, let alone the flying class? If Gandalf were accepted, it would mean he'd be staying at Hogwarts Castle long-term, which hardly suited the title, the Grey Wanderer. Seeing Dewey's confusion, Gandalf laughed. "This is thanks to you. The Ministry of Magic you set up has built a lot of Floo network fireplaces across the western continent. An old man like me no longer needs to travel great distances to contact and organize allies. I can reach anywhere in an instant by stepping through a fireplace. So I'm free now," he continued, "and I think my flying is still pretty good. Why not come here and apply to teach it? Am I welcome?" Welcomed, of course. Dewey couldn't refuse. Still, he tried one last time. "Gandalf, flying class seems a bit light for you. How about another subject? History of magic, perhaps? Anything you prefer?" Gandalf shook his head with a chuckle. "No, thank you. Flying class is leisurely and fun. It suits me." Seeing Gandalf's mind made up, Dewey gave in and appointed him flying class professor at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. As Gandalf had said, flying class was relaxed, one lesson per week and required only for first-year students. It was more like a PE teacher's role than a demanding academic post. The flying professor also organized Quidditch matches, but compared with professors who taught 3 or 4 lessons a week to all 7 years, it was an easy post. Once the 8 first-year courses had professors in place, Dewey set them to prepare their curricula. He named the Transfiguration professor and appointed Edward, Hogwarts' head house elf, as vice principal to oversee the school's opening and daily affairs. Dewey himself took on the role of principal, but did not teach a specific subject. He claimed the Amansul Tower and its garden as his private quarters, closed to the public. The rest of the castle would serve as the school. Dewey also divided the students into 4 houses: Phoenix, Thunderbird, Dragon, and Basilisk, corresponding to Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin, and embodying courage, wisdom, loyalty, and cunning. Those 10 years had not found Dewey idle. He had traveled widely, visiting unmarked southern towns and the ruins of Angmar in the north, and had brought back many useful things. Among his creations was a sorting hat made of dragon hide. He infused it with a portion of his own mind and threaded into it bits of Gandalf's, Elrond's, and Galadriel's thoughts and wills, giving the hat a unique personality. Perhaps Dewey had the sorting hat from another magical world in mind when he made it. His hat was wise, humorous, and insightful, but also something of a chatterbox. It loved music and invention, often humming to itself and dragging Dewey and Arwen along to hear whatever new tune it had composed. With preparations complete, Edward went to the secret room where the acceptance quill and the book of admittance were kept. He checked the list of new students due to enroll in September and began preparing the acceptance letters. Mid-July, Hogsmeade. Wizards here did not live completely apart from ordinary folk, but there was still a clear distance between them. Since the arrival of magic users, ordinary people had usually either revered or envied them. Witches and wizards came to be seen as a different higher class, so the two communities tended to keep to themselves. Hogsmeade had grown into a wizarding community where wizards and non-magical people lived side by side, yet remained largely separate. On this day, the Bailey family, an ordinary wizarding household, were celebrating the 11th birthday of their eldest son, Adam. Mr. Bailey had been one of the first students to finish the magic crash course. Of the 540 who took that course, his performance had been merely average, leaving him in the lower middle ranks. After graduation, he joined the Ministry of Magic in the Department of Magical Transportation, where he helped build and maintain the Floo network. He had always been grateful that he had passed the assessment and become a wizard. Despite his modest talents, magic had transformed his life. Magic made daily chores effortless. A flick of his wand and the broom swept the house. Dishes leapt into the sink to be washed and then flew back to the cupboard. The fireplace in his living room was connected to the flue network, and a pinch of flue powder and a step into the fire could take him anywhere. He married the woman he loved, and they had 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter, living a contented life. For Adam's birthday, Mr. Bailey had left work early to buy a magical cake in Diagon Alley. The family gathered around it as the enchanted candles burned with colorful sparks, and a troupe of chocolate figurines danced and sang "Happy Birthday." Because he worked at the ministry, Mr. Bailey knew more than most. The Lord was opening a school of magic and would be recruiting students. As the family celebrated, his thoughts kept wandering to that. He had seen the vast library and wondrous artifacts of Hogwarts when he was at the crash course, and he had often regretted that he hadn't worked harder back then to learn more. With his abilities, he had already tried his best, but he believed he might never again have the chance to see such marvels. Now the news of a new school filled him with hope, and he silently prayed that his eldest son might be chosen. He did not speak of this to his family. He did not want to raise Adam's hopes only to see them dashed, but he watched his son closely all the same. "Dad, what's wrong?" Adam asked, noticing his father's distracted look. Mr. Bailey blinked and was about to answer when a crisp tapping came at the window. Everyone turned toward the sound. A pure white great snowy owl perched there, causing surprised expressions all around the room. Only Mr. Bailey's face broke into open delight. He hurried to the window and flung it open. Chapter 323, Admission Notice. A great snowy owl flew in through the open window without so much as a courtesy bow, alighting gracefully on the table in front of Adam Bailey. It cocked its head and hooted once, as if to confirm something, then lifted a scaly leg to present a parchment. The owl was nearly a meter tall. The whole Bailey family gaped. "What a magnificent bird! Whose is it?" Mrs. Bailey asked. Adam, startled, took the parchment. "Is this for me?" The owl gave an almost human nod and looked a little impatient, as if urging him to accept it at once. Seeing his eldest hesitate, Mr. Bailey's face lit with excitement. "Adam, it's a messenger from the Lord of Dragons. Take it." "Lord of Dragons?" The family went silent in astonishment. Why would the Lord of Dragons send a letter, let alone to Adam? Adam unfolded the parchment. On the back was a red wax seal bearing a crest, a phoenix, a dragon, a thunderbird, and a basilisk encircling a stylized H. On the front, written in emerald green ink, the address read, Mr. Adam Bailey, Hogsmeade, Dragon Street, White Fresh Community No. 21, by the dining table on the right side of the first floor. Adam read the address aloud in bewilderment. How did it know I was sitting at the dining table? Is someone watching us? Mr. Bailey waved his hand, eyes shining with reverence. Don't be ridiculous. The Lord of Dragons doesn't watch a child. He could find you as easily as turning his hand. There's nothing he can't do. The family nodded. To them, the Lord of Dragons was almost godlike. Open it, Mr. Bailey urged. Quick, let's see what it says. Inside were 2 sheets of parchment and a small silver badge bearing the same crest as the wax seal. Adam picked up the badge, turned it over, and then set it on the table, puzzled. He read the parchment aloud. Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Duir Blackrobe, Lord of Hogsmeade, Bree, Isengard, Supreme Wizard, Lord of Dragons, Bane of Orcs, Troll Slayer, White Killer, Tree Feller. Dear Mr. Bailey, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Enclosed is a list of all necessary books and equipment. Term begins on September 1st. We await your owl by July 31st. Sincerely, Edward, Deputy Principal. Note, the silver badge attached to this letter is a timed port key. It will activate at 10 a.m. on August 1st, transporting you to Diagon Alley to purchase your school books and equipment. Please be sure not to miss the time. So this badge is a port key? Adam asked, surprised. But Diagon Alley isn't far. Can't we just walk there? Should we use the port key to go to Diagon Alley? His siblings pressed. Mr. Bailey frowned at the badge, then smiled, remembering something. That makes sense. Some colleagues in the transportation department's portkey office were working overtime the other day. They were making portkeys. Still, I suppose every acceptance letter comes with one. Not everyone lives as close to Diagon Alley as we do. He ruffled Adam's hair. Don't worry about it. We can go by ourselves. Have a look at the rest of the list so we can prepare. Adam unfolded the second sheet. It detailed required items: black robes, a pointed hat, protective gloves, a winter cloak, a series of textbooks, as well as a wand, a cauldron, and other equipment. Mr. Bailey smiled. All of that's sold in Diagon Alley, especially the wands. Adam, haven't you wanted a wand? We can buy it early and avoid the crowds on August 1st. Adam's eyes brightened. Can we go now? Please? Mr. Bailey hesitated. Years before, when Adam's gift first appeared, he had tried to buy a wand immediately, but Mr. Bill, the wand maker, had refused. A child's magic was still unstable. A wand should wait until around 11 or 12. Mr. Bailey had accepted that then, but he still shook his head now at his son's pleading face. Not today. It's too late. We'll go tomorrow and get everything at once. Adam reluctantly gave up for the night. Excitement deferred until the next day. Across Hogsmeade, Bree, Isengard, and farther afield, owls brought acceptance letters the same way. In the river corner, where the Dunedain lived, a similar knock on the window broke the usual quiet. The Dunedain stared at the precise address on the parchment, down to the bedroom, and at the unexpected news inside. They had not expected the Wizard Lord of Weathertop to be recruiting students, much less offering places to their children. They admired wizards and the wonders of magic, and some were eager for their children to learn it. Yet the idea of sending youngsters to Hogwarts gave them pause. Their chieftain, Aragorn, happened to be in the tribal lands, so those who received letters sought his counsel. Aragorn, who carried a wand personally crafted for him by Duir and had practiced magic himself, welcomed the news. He was pleased that his clansmen's children had been accepted and offered to personally take the Dunedain children to Diagon Alley to purchase wands and all necessary supplies. Elven children in Rivendell, Lothlorien, Mirkwood, Dorwinion, and elsewhere also received letters. All of them now waited for the portkey to activate on August 1st. Chapter 324, Diagon Alley Day Trip. On August 1st, almost every wizarding household in Dewey's territory had a Floo network fireplace. Through a flue, you could reach Diagon Alley directly, so the portkey badge that came with a Hogwarts acceptance letter had become less essential. Many families couldn't even wait for the portkey to activate on the official day. To avoid the crush and to get a head start on supplies, they took their children to Diagon Alley as soon as they received their letters. Others, fond of the bustle or curious about the portkey itself, preferred to wait until August 1st and travel that way. The Dunedain and Elven families without flue access all used portkeys. Anlamir's family, Dunedain from the corner of the river, chose to wait for the portkey. Their chieftain, Aragorn, came along as well. On the morning of August 1st, they rose early, finished their preparations, and waited for Aragorn to check the time. In Middle-earth, precise timekeeping, minutes and seconds, was a recent development. Until the Ministry of Magic was founded, folks measured time roughly with hourglasses or dripping water. Under Dewey's guidance, however, the unspeakables of the Department of Mysteries began studying time magic and invented accurate clocks. The unspeakables, wizards immersed in the study of the deepest mysteries, served Dewey alone by oath and Fidelius charm. Dewey had entrusted them with complex projects, research into death, time, soul, prophecy, and the universe itself, and even the secrets behind the Deathly Hallows, the creation of the Philosopher's Stone, and relics like Ravenclaw's diadem and Hufflepuff's cup. Dewey believed that recruiting and educating wizards, training potion masters, alchemy masters, charm masters, transfiguration masters, and so on, would expand magical wisdom. With many minds working, he hoped to eventually reach higher realms of understanding. Thanks to the unspeakables' work, clocks and pocket watches that measured hours, minutes, and seconds were soon produced. The ministry even installed a great clock in its main hall with warning functions. Wizards embraced precise timekeeping. Magical clocks and watches could be set to chime sharply to wake someone, remind them to feed animals, or signal mealtimes. Craftsmen without magic used these designs to make reliable mechanical timepieces as well, and soon clocks spread across Middle-earth. Elven and dwarven artisans, renowned for their craftsmanship, made beautifully delicate watches. To honor this innovation, clocks everywhere adopted the ministry's standard time and kept their second hands synchronized. Middle-earth had its first unified time. Aragorn checked a silver pocket watch made by an elven artisan. Thanks to elven craft and enchantment, the watch was effectively indestructible and never faltered. It was minutes to 10. He told Anlamir's family to get ready, to hold hands tightly, and they gathered around the small silver badge bearing the Hogwarts crest that lay on the table. When the watch struck exactly 10, the badge glowed blue and vibrated. Aragorn's face went serious. He took Anlamir's left hand and shouted, "Everyone hold on! Don't let go! We're leaving now!" Anlamir and his parents tightened their grip. Aragorn reached out with his free hand and grabbed the buzzing badge. The instant his skin touched metal, it felt as if some invisible force latched onto him. A pressure pulled at his navel and then at the whole group, sudden and irresistible. An intense tug ran through them, and in a blink they were yanked from their spot. Speed and colors blurred into streaks. For a dizzy moment they felt squeezed through a rubber tube and then expelled. With a hard thump, Anlamir and his parents hit the ground, retching and pale. Aragorn managed to stay upright, but felt a wave of nausea. "Ugh, that's dreadful," he muttered, staring at the badge. "Is there no gentler way to travel?" They recovered slowly. When the dizziness finally subsided, they looked up and took in their surroundings. They had arrived at the far end of Diagon Alley. The alley was alive. The cobbled street wound with throngs of people. Shopfronts lined both sides, glittering and strange. One window displayed robes, another telescopes and curious silver instruments. Baskets of bat spleens and jars of eel eyes sat beside stacks of spellbooks, quills, parchment rolls, potion bottles, and cauldrons. Magic scented the air. Enchanted lights flickered and danced at every corner. Owls flitted overhead, ferrying goods between shops. Groups of young wizards peered longingly into broomstick shop windows at the latest models. Enchanted mannequins stood guard outside stores, constantly greeting passersby. Anlamir's eyes shone with excitement. He felt as if he had stepped into a real, magical world. The rush and wonder of Diagon Alley at the start of a school year wrapped around them like a spell. Chapter 325, Wand Shop. The start of the school year had filled Diagon Alley with a bustle of robed wizards, and among them a smattering of elven couples, their skin and garments almost luminous. They brought their small children to buy supplies, and wizards, being a visual lot, greeted these graceful visitors with obvious warmth. Madame Rose from the robe shop was particularly smitten. When a little elf came in for a custom robe, she could barely contain herself. On learning the child had received a letter from Hogwarts, she practically swooned. "I'm so glad you're going to Hogwarts, my dear. Absolutely the right choice. I studied there once, though I wasn't nearly so fortunate as you. I could only stay a year. But those days are unforgettable, as clear to me as if they happened yesterday." She added with a proud little sigh, "My son William is starting this year too. It's a pity he's not here. I would have loved to introduce you." The reserved elf family looked politely overwhelmed by Madame Rose's enthusiasm. The little elf who had received the letter shone with shy curiosity at the mention of Hogwarts. Madame Rose kept calling the child "my dear," which was amusing because elves measure age differently. 1 elf year equals 12 solar years, and elves come of age at 24 elf years. Hogwarts admits students by elf years, not solar years. Otherwise, an 11-year-old elf, who might look like a toddler, would be admitted to a school that is not a nursery. The robe shop doorbell chimed again. Aragorn stepped in with Anlamir. The elf parents had gone elsewhere for supplies. "Welcome," Madame Rose chirped, smiling at the pair. She glanced at Anlamir and then down the room. "You must be a new student too. Just wait. I'll measure that little elf first, then you." Anlamir followed her gaze. On a small platform, a child stood while a magical tape measure playfully wrapped and unwrapped, taking precise measurements. Anlamir had never seen an elf up close before and watched in open awe. The little elf was more beautiful than the stories had suggested, somehow blurring the lines of gender in their delicate features. The elf caught Anlamir's look and returned a reserved, curious smile. Then the elf spotted Aragorn at Anlamir's side, brightened, and called in Elvish, "Estelle!" Aragorn, surprised and delighted, answered, Aranir, I didn't expect to see you here. His eyes then fell on the elf couple nearby. Long time no see, Arantar Yavaniel. What brings you here? The elf couple returned the greeting warmly. Estelle, it's been so long. Where have you been since you left Rivendell? Their gaze shifted to the human child with Aragorn. And this is a child of my people. He received a letter from Hogwarts, too. We're here for school supplies, Aragorn explained, ruffling Anlamir's hair. All four Eldar had known Aragorn back in Rivendell. Aranir had been his childhood playmate. Because elves age so differently, Aragorn was fully grown, while Aranir still looked like a child of 8 or 9. Seeing friends they hadn't met in a while, the two families decided to go together. Anlamir and Aranir, thus introduced, fell into companionable conversation. After being measured, paying Madame Rose, and arranging to return for robes in the afternoon, the group set off for the wand shop. Ollivander's was set midway down Diagon Alley, a small, unassuming front with Ollivander's Wand Shop lettered in gold above the door and a single antique wand displayed in the window. From the outside it looked cramped, hardly room for Aragorn and his elf companion, but when they stepped through the door, the interior seemed to open into a much larger space. It could have held twice their number without feeling crowded. Near the entrance, a long wooden bench ran against the wall. Beyond it, tall shelves rose in neat rows, stacked with long boxes. The shop was quiet in that particular hush of a place kept for careful work. The sounds of the street were shut away by the door and windows, and there was an intimacy to the silence. Even so, the elf couple's gifted senses picked up subtle magic vibrating from the shelves like the faint breath of many sleeping things. It was as if the wands themselves murmured. "Is anyone here?" Aragorn called toward the counter. A moment later, a man stepped out from the depths between the shelves, a wooden ladder at his feet. His hair was a shock of red that seemed to catch the light like flame, untidy, as if ruffled by a gust of wind. Startled, Aragorn's hand went to his wand. "Oh, sorry, did I frighten you?" The man gave an apologetic smile and explained, "I've been arranging wand boxes. A rather particular young wizard came in earlier. It took me some time to help him find a match. I am Mr. Ollivander, Bill Ollivander. Welcome to Ollivander's Wand Shop." Bill had been taught the craft by a man named Duir. As a child of a carpenter, Bill had no surname originally. Duir had given him the name Ollivander, and Bill had taken to it with pride. Now he ran his shop, and his family bore that name. He looked directly at the two children, Aranir and Anlamir, and his eyes lit up. "New students this year? Elven friends. Welcome, welcome. You're the second group of elves I've had today. Elves are blessed. Each one of you is astonishing, and your magic is enviable. The last little elf was from the woodland realm, Mirkwood. Hollywood, giant spider sinew, 11 inches, powerful, remarkably wondrous." Bill's enthusiasm tumbled on, a curious, eccentric monologue that left everyone glancing at one another. He seemed to come back to himself and cleared his throat, green eyes turning back to the youngsters. "Right, who wants to choose their wand first?" Chapter 326, Wand Selection. Let Aranir go first. Anlamir stepped back and gestured for the small elf to come forward. After a morning of conversation, Anlamir and Aranir had gotten to know one another. With Aragorn acting as intermediary, the two children had become friends. Although Aranir, the little elf, was technically older than their leader Aragorn, he looked no more than 8 or 9. 11-year-old Anlamir naturally took on an older brother air and watched over him. Bill Ollivander didn't wait for an answer. "Then this young friend of the elves will go first," he said, bending down so his deep green eyes could study Aranir. The attention made the elf a little uneasy. Bill waved his wand, and a tape measure flew from the counter to Aranir. The silver-marked tape measured shoulder to fingertip, wrist to elbow, shoulder to floor, knee to armpit, then head circumference, even the distance between his nostrils. Everyone exchanged looks at the meticulousness. While measuring, Bill explained, "Every Ollivander wand contains powerful magic in its core. We typically use dragon heartstring, thunderbird feathers, giant eagle feathers, and elf hair. Every wand is unique. Even 2 feathers from the same thunderbird are different, so a wand made for someone else will never be quite as effective for you." When he finished, Bill asked, "Aranir, right? Which hand do you use?" The elf shyly raised his right hand. I can use both, but I usually prefer my right. Bill nodded, sent the tape measure back to the counter, and delved into the shelving. He produced a small rectangular box and drew out a pale yellowish-white wand. He handed it to Aranir. Elves usually bond with wands that have elf hair cores. This one is white oak with a Sindar elf hair core. Try it. Aranir recognized the description. He was a pure-blood Sindar with amber eyes and silver hair, and accepted the wand carefully, uncertain what to do. Give it a wave, Bill prompted. Aranir obeyed. The next instant, a white beam shot up, punched a hole in the ceiling, and left Aranir pale and apologetic. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Bill waved a hand, reassuring. It's all right. Nothing to be ashamed of. Then he tapped another wand on the counter, and the ceiling neatly mended itself. The two children stared in awe. Bill gently took the wand back. Not for you, he said. Let's try the next. Wand after wand was handed to Aranir. Each one produced a little disaster, raging winds, flooding water, blinding flashes, enough to attract the curious eyes of passers-by peering in through the display window. The waiting bench in the shop filled with people who had gone from concern to resigned amusement, watching the commotion in silence. At last, Bill produced a red and white wand. This one I'm certain of, 14 inches, a new spring branch from a traint. I traded a bottle of growth potion for it. Its core is a strand of hair from a high-ranking Sindar who passed through here. He bought a wand from me before sailing west to the Grey Havens. Aranir took the wand and felt it merge with his arm. A holy, soft glow radiated from the wand and him alike. He seemed to be wrapped in faint elven song. Everyone's eyes widened. Bill clapped with genuine delight. Wonderful, Mr. Aranir. I think you will be an extraordinary elf. Aranir flushed at the praise, but cradled the wand protectively. The elf couple smiled, relieved that their son had found his wand. Bill's gaze moved to the other boy, whose eyes now shone with impatience. All right, your turn, young sir. Onlamir's trial was even louder. Crashes and bangs filled the shop. After a long search that left his arm sore from trying unsuitable wands, he finally felt the right match click into place. 12¼ inches, a malong tree branch with a giant eagle feather core. The moment he held it, the pain of the earlier trials vanished. He ran his hand along the wand, grinning as if it were an extension of himself. Aranir, look, I can feel power flowing from it. Aranir, more reserved, still had bright eyes and red-tinged ears as he admired his friend's excitement. Aragorn and the elf couple shared pleased looks, then approached Bill together. How much for the 2 wands? Aragorn asked. 7 galleons each, Bill replied. That's a discount set by Lord Duir and the Ministry of Magic for new students. Regularly or for replacements, the price is much higher. Aragorn's face brightened. Lord Duir is admirable, opening schools and providing discounted wands to students. He had his own wand, made by Dewey, so he hadn't needed to buy from Diagon Alley, but he knew Ollivander wands were expensive. Outside of those within Duir's domain, elves in Dunedain traveling from afar might pay hundreds of galleons. A single wand could buy dozens of war horses. Bill looked pleased at the praise. As someone taught wand-making by Dewey and granted the Ollivander name, he was fiercely loyal to his mentor and visibly warmed by the compliment. Aragorn pulled out 14 galleons to pay. The elf couple protested, embarrassed. Estelle, we've already exchanged enough at Gringotts. You don't need to pay for us. Aragorn smiled gently. There's no need for the formality, Aranta. We are friends, and I've not returned to Rivendell in a long time. Let this be a gift for Aranir as he begins school. Before they could argue further, Bill interjected with a grin. If I may, my 2 elven friends, I have an impertinent request. Both parties looked at him. I can give you these 2 wands for free, but would you be willing to give me 2 strands of hair to use in making wands? The elf couple hadn't expected the proposition, but readily agreed. Each plucked a single strand and handed it to Bill. Chapter 327. How do I get back? Bill laughed as he took the 2 strands of hair and waved off the wand fees for Onlamir and Aranir, then saw the families on their way. After leaving the wand shop, Aragorn felt a little awkward. He had intended to pay for the 2 wands himself, but the elven couple had already covered the cost with their hair. To distract himself and to give the children a treat, Aragorn took Anlamir and the little elf Aranir to the magical menagerie in Diagon Alley. The shop was full of owls, but also ashwinders, fire salamanders, invisible toads, rabbits that could be worn as hats, jewel-encrusted fire crabs, dancing gerboas, and a dozen other magically bred creatures. The owner had also learned crossbreeding techniques from Lord Duir and produced pegasi, hippogriffs, and other larger beasts. Those, however, were generally available only by special order. The pegasi, beloved by the Elves, mostly went to Rivendell and Lothlorien, while hippogriffs had become the exclusive mounts of the Dunlending tribes. Aragorn chose a Eurasian eagle owl for Onlemere and a snowy owl for Little Aranir. The owner brightened when he saw the two most expensive birds being sold and explained warmly, "You have excellent taste. These two owls are of exceptional lineage, descendants of the great snowy owl kept by the Lord of Hogwarts Castle. One is a hybrid of the great snowy owl and a Eurasian eagle owl, the other a hybrid of the great snowy owl and a common snowy owl. The great snowy owl is said to have originally come from the island of Numenor. In all of Middle-earth, only Hogwarts Castle still keeps them. Their descendants are smarter, fly better, and hardly ever get lost, perfect companions for sending letters and parcels." The children grew even more attached to their owls on hearing that. Aragorn's expression flickered. As chieftain of the northern Dunedain and a direct descendant of Arnor's royal line, he had visited Annúminas and knew that Duir had taken a group of great snowy owls from there to live on Weathertop. For the Dunedain, descendants of the Númenóreans, that species carried a special significance. After the owls, the group bought the rest of the supplies they needed for enrollment. Other families who had received acceptance letters had converged on Diagon Alley that day as well. Once their shopping was done, a new problem presented itself: how to get home. Aragorn examined the silver badge that had brought them earlier, half hoping it might teleport them back, but it showed no sign of working. Fortunately, they did not have to puzzle over it for long. Aurors in uniform were patrolling both ends of Diagon Alley and the side streets. When they saw the bewildered families of new students, they stepped forward to help. Under an Auror's guidance, Aragorn and the others walked to the western end of Diagon Alley and arrived at the Ministry of Magic Tower. The atrium on the first floor was vast and breathtaking. In the center stood a magical fountain with a golden statue of Lord Duir riding a great dragon. A thin golden stream issued from his wand into the pool. The fountain was full of coins, mostly bronze nuts and silver sickles, with a few galleons tossed in by passers-by. No one knew who had started the tradition, but wizards treated it like a wishing well and would throw in a coin while making a wish to the Gilded Lord. The coins were periodically collected and donated to the Twin Trees Hospital. The Twin Trees Hospital had been established by Duir and was overseen by Madame Amanduff, who was reputed to be the finest healer in the land. Though a wizarding hospital, its care extended to all subjects within Duir's realm. Along the walls of the atrium ran a long row of fireplaces. People were constantly stepping out of them or vanishing into them. The polished floor reflected everyone's images. Owls and parcels flitted through the air, and staff and visitors hurried about. Aragorn and the others approached the reception desk, presented their children's acceptance letters for verification, registered, and followed instructions to the Department of Magical Transportation. The department staff did not neglect the new arrivals. They patiently explained the travel options available to families returning home after buying enrollment supplies. One option, the clerk said, is to apply at the portkey office for a portkey to take you directly home. A second is the night bus. Stand by the roadside with your wand extended, and the bus will appear to take you safely home. And there is a third, more convenient option. You can apply to have your home fireplace connected to the Floo network. Our department will dispatch personnel to activate your fireplace. Once connected, you and your family can travel between your home and any other fireplace on the network, making trips to Hogwarts or Diagon Alley much easier. Almost every family chose to apply for the Floo network. Who would refuse a way to travel instantly across thousands of miles? The department clerk brightened. The promotion of the Floo network was part of their remit, and explained the next steps. In the next few days, our employees will visit your homes to activate your fireplaces. We recommend you buy some flue powder in advance so you can use the fireplace as soon as it's ready. If you're in a hurry, you can visit the portkey office now to collect a portkey and return immediately. But if you have time, I suggest trying the night bus. It's a different experience. Most people shuddered at the thought of the portkey after remembering how disorienting it had felt and chose a different mode of transport. Aragorn and Anlamir's family decided to take the night bus. Little Aranir's family, however, lived in Rivendell and already had their fireplace connected. After a warm farewell, they stepped into the flow and returned home. Chapter 328, Night Bus. Aragorn and Anlamir's family left the Ministry of Magic and made their way to the main road. Following the directions of a Department of Magical Transportation official, little Anlamir, still thrilled with his new wand, stood at the curb and pointed it toward the road. Not long after, a red and green blur flashed across the distance. Before anyone could properly register it, the blur stopped with an impossible jolt, and a red and green double-decker bus materialized in front of them. Transportation in Middle-earth was still largely horse-drawn, and none of them had ever seen a vehicle with metal and glass windows like this. Aragorn and the others stared in astonishment. After a day spent in Diagon Alley and the Ministry, though, they were no longer completely overwhelmed. They simply marveled at the wonders of magic. Welcome to the Night Bus, an emergency transport for stranded witches and wizards. Just stick out your wand and step aboard, and we can take you anywhere you need to go. I'm Stan Shunpike, your conductor. A freckled young wizard in a red uniform hopped down and introduced himself with a smile. He urged them on, glancing at the pile of luggage. Hurry up, we've got passengers getting off at the next stop. Need any help? No, thank you. We can manage, Aragorn said, shaking his head. Between the three adults, they had enough hands for Anlamir's things. Stan relaxed and stepped aside to wait for them to board. After they had climbed up, Stan got on last, called to the scruffy-bearded driver, Ernie, everyone's aboard. Let's go. The driver, wearing goggle-like spectacles that magnified his eyes comically, gave an okay gesture, shut the door, and shouted, All right, go. He floored it. With a whoosh, the bus shot forward like a rocket. Everyone inside lurched backward under the sudden inertia. Stan, quick as ever, flicked his wand and cast a cushioning charm over Aragorn's party just in time. Aragorn, agile and sure-footed, steadied himself without assistance, earning an approving glance from the conductor. Where to? Stan asked, focusing on Aragorn. The corner of the river, where the Clear Spring and Echoing Rivers meet. Can you get us there? Aragorn replied. Did you hear that, Ernie? Corner of the river, Clear Spring and Echoing. Stan called back toward the driver, and after receiving another brisk nod, he turned to them, all smiles. Say the name, and there's nowhere on this continent we can't reach. That'll be 1 galleon per person to the corner. 4 of you. 4 galleons. Extra 1 sickle if you want hot chocolate. Would you like some? Aragorn declined the hot chocolate. There was no way he could drink anything on such a ride, and handed over 4 galleons. Stan tore off 4 tickets and led them to the back. The interior was much larger than the outside suggested. Tiers of bunk beds stretched along the cabin, some occupied, some empty. It's a while to the corner, Stan said. You can lie down and rest. I'll wake you when we arrive. They didn't lie down. The 3 of them sat on a lower bunk, gripping the posts to keep from being flung around, their eyes glued to the rapidly shifting scenery. The night bus was unbelievably fast. It leapt from one hilltop to another and paid no heed to roads, crashing through forests, squeezing between trunks. Every time they braced for a collision, the bus would either swerve with impossible grace, or, stranger still, the trees seemed to shift aside to make a path. It was as if the whole wood cooperated with the bus's passage. What made their hearts pound even more was the driver's attitude. Ernie sped the whole way, and yet often turned to gossip with Stan or raised a flask to his lips without seeming to touch the wheel. After each chat session, the bus steadied again, and they all breathed a little easier. Stan, ever the chatterbox, redirected his attention to them and began to gab. You must be the parents of a new student. Did you come to Diagon Alley for school supplies? He asked. He looked enviously at young Anlamir. You've come at an excellent time. When I was at Hogwarts, I only studied a year. My marks weren't great, so I ended up a conductor. but those were the best days of my life. The castle's full of wonders you'll never find the end of. You won't regret it." Anlomir, wide-eyed, asked, "Mr. Stan, can you tell me about the magical places in Hogwarts?" Stan shook his head with a smile. No, if I tell you it spoils the surprise. You have to see it for yourself." The family exchanged looks of eager curiosity. Aragorn, who had attended Dewey and Arwen's wedding and seen some of the world's marvels, agreed wholeheartedly. Hogwarts could not be captured in mere words. The night bus made several stops, dropping off other passengers, until at last, with the last light of sunset in the sky, Stan cried, "Corner of the river, passengers for this stop, please alight." Aragorn and his family hurried off. Whether a portkey or the night bus, these modes of travel tested one's nerves, but they were undeniably miraculous. What surprised them most was how precisely the bus delivered them to their doorstep, and how quiet it was about it. None of their neighbors appeared to notice. The bus seemed to arrive and depart like a ghost. After everyone had disembarked, the doors closed. With a soft whoosh, the night bus shrank into a streak of red and green light and darted away, gone in an instant. Truly wondrous magic. Aragorn breathed, deeply impressed. The day's experiences stayed vivid in his memory, and he found himself admiring Duir, Dewey, he thought, who had a hand in creating such things. Anlomir's family nodded in agreement beside him. Chapter 329, First Day of School. Aragorn politely declined the Anlomir family's invitation. Before he left, he knelt and spoke gently to the boy. "Anlomir, getting an acceptance letter to Hogwarts is something many can only dream of. You must seize this chance and study hard, understand?" The child's tender face turned solemn as he nodded. "Chieftain, I will work hard to learn magic. When I grow strong, I will protect the glory of our Dunedain." Aragorn smiled and tousled the boy's fluffy hair. "All right, Anlomir, don't put too much pressure on yourself. Study hard, make true friends, and be happy as you grow. Glory isn't something a little one needs to carry yet." After bidding the family farewell, Aragorn returned home to prepare for his own travels and adventures. Anlomir, meanwhile, hurried back and opened the magic book the moment he arrived. He practiced wand work non-stop, and 3 days later he finally managed to cast the Lumos charm. Excited, he ran downstairs to tell his parents, but the front door was knocked just then. When his father opened it, a stranger in a black work uniform stood on the threshold. "Who are you?" his father asked cautiously. The man wore a professional expression. "Is this the home of Mr. Anlomir? I'm Matthew, from the Flu Network office of the Ministry of Magic's Department of Magical Transportation. You requested Flu Connection. I'm here to link your fireplace so you can travel through it." Seeing the wand in the man's hand, the family understood immediately and hurried him inside. Matthew declined their offer of tea with the same businesslike courtesy, set to work at the fireplace. He waved his wand and chanted quietly. In a short while, he finished. "All right, your fireplace is now connected to the Flu Network," he announced. "As long as you have flu powder, you can travel from this hearth to any other connected fireplace." He took a moment to explain a few precautions, then said his farewells. "Mr. Matthew, please have a cup of tea before you go," the family urged. "No, thank you. I still have another connection to make." He declined politely, stepped outside, and apparated away. The family stood in amazement. Anlomir was bubbling with excitement. He promised himself he would learn to do that too when he went to school. Time flew. September 1st arrived. Families whose children had received letters gathered in Hogsmeade and Diagon Alley through their fireplaces. It was the opening day of term, and the area buzzed with activity. At the bridge leading from Hogsmeade to Hogwarts, there was a reception point. A steward from the castle stood by as a line of enchanted carriages, each pulled by a team of Pegasi, waited to take the new students across the bridge. The steward organized the children into the carriages while parents watched at the bridgehead, reluctant to let go but not daring to interrupt. The Pegasi, obedient to their charge, began to move once the carriages were full, carrying the children over the bridge and along the winding mountain road toward the castle. Inside the carriages were local wizarding children, Dunedain youngsters, and some elves, whose beauty drew many curious glances. The timid children only dared a quick peek, while the braver ones tried to gather courage to speak. The elf children blushed and drew closer together under so much attention. Soon everyone's attention was captured by other sights: the winged pegasi, the Aral cattle grazing on the hillside, their pure white hides and horns catching the sun like something sacred. Onlomir and an elf boy named Aranir, who had met earlier in Diagon Alley, sat together and stared at the pegasi. "Horses with wings," Onlomir said, awed and a little envious. "How amazing! I wish they could just fly us to the castle." Aranir's voice was clear and musical. "Rivendell has pegasi too. I heard they were bred by Headmaster Dewey. I've always wanted one, but they're rare. I didn't expect to see so many here." They chatted the whole way. After winding through mountain roads, the carriages reached the castle gates. The children fell silent at the sight of Hogwarts rising before them, its towers and battlements magnificent against the sky. Inside the grounds, two enormous trees dominated the courtyard, one with golden leaves so fine they seemed crafted from gold, the other a white tree like polished jade with silver foliage. Under the setting sun, their light turned the castle into a realm of gold and silver, solemn and radiant. Thunderbirds, great and powerful, unfurled their wings from lofty nests and circled above, their calls like distant thunder. Their plumage shimmered with iridescent halos as tiny sparks danced along their feathers. The tallest tower, Amon Sul, jutted like a pillar into the clouds, around which countless great snowy owls wheeled and danced. When the carriages reached the main entrance, Edward, the steward, deputy headmaster, and transfiguration professor, stood waiting in a dark blue robe that spoke of authority. One by one, the children climbed down and gathered before him. His stern presence quieted them instantly. He cast his eyes over the group, counted quickly, then began. "Welcome to Hogwarts," he said. "I am Professor Edward, deputy head and professor of transfiguration. The start of term feast will begin soon, but before you take your seats in the Great Hall, you must be sorted into your houses. The sorting is important. Your house will be your family here at Hogwarts. You will attend classes with them, sleep in your house dormitory, and spend your leisure time in your house common room. Our 4 houses are Phoenix, Dragon, Thunderbird, and Basilisk. Once you are sorted, your successes will earn points for your house, and any rule breaking will cost points. At the end of the year, the house with the most points will win the House Cup, a great honor. I hope each of you will bring glory to your house." He clapped his hands to gain their attention. "All right, the sorting ceremony will begin. Form 2 lines and follow me to the Great Hall." Chapter 330, Branch Ceremony. At Professor Edward's word, the new students fell into 2 neat lines and followed him like a tail through the golden gates that opened on their own. The Great Hall, once the castle's banquet chamber, had been repurposed for the students' meals and ceremonies. Thousands of candles floated high above, bathing the hall in a warm light. The domed ceiling resembled the night sky outside, scattered clouds drifting past countless stars, and a bright, near-touchable moon. 4 long tables were set beneath that sky, their polished surfaces catching the candlelight and the reflected stars. Golden place settings gleamed at each chair. At the head of the tables were the professors' seats. Dewey sat on the central golden chair. The seat to his left was empty. To his right sat his wife, Arwen, who taught the history of magic. Lady Galadriel occupied the next seat, radiant and tall, a holy light about her that outshone even the moon. The students watched her with open awe, especially the elven children, who whispered and stared, reverent. Galadriel smiled gently, and the light about her brightened, her gaze sweeping kindly over each new face. To her right sat Gandalf, benevolent and warm-eyed, sharing in that quiet welcome. Deputy Principal Edward led the newcomers to the front of the hall, where a 3-legged stool stood. On the stool rested a new and splendid hat. When every child was in place, the hat moved. Its brim trembled, its seams parted like a mouth and 2 eyes, and then a melodic voice rang out. "I was once a simple hat, belonging to the black-robed wizard Duir, but today I am given thought and mission, to tell you where you belong. Listen, little wizard, listen to the tide in your heart. If a fearless fire burns in your chest, if you dare chase a dragon's flame and cross unknown bridges, you belong to Phoenix House. If a nest of wisdom glows in your eyes, if you love to gather shells from the sea of books and seek mysteries in the stars, if you make riddles bloom and knowledge grow, you belong to Thunderbird House. Fear not. Be not afraid. Put me on. I will find the hall for you wherever you come from." The hat finished its song with a little bow. Dewey was the first to clap from the professors' seats. The other professors and students followed, impressed. "Students whose names are called, please step forward and sit on the stool for sorting," Edward announced, unrolling a parchment. Anlomir. The first name belonged to a small Dunedain boy. Professor Alpha of Astronomy, also a Dunedain, sat up straight at the head table, eyes fixed on him. Under everyone's gaze, Anlomir shuffled forward and sat on the stool. The sorting hat was set atop his head. "Oh, a little Dunedain, welcome to Hogwarts. Let me see your deepest wishes." "Ha, what grand dreams! To learn all magic, to restore your people's glory, to defeat evil and protect your homeland. That's not easy. Where should I put you?" The hat muttered, as if thinking aloud. Anlomir's mind went blank with nerves. After a minute's deliberation, the hat declared, "I know where to sort you. Phoenix House." It cried out, and the hall erupted in applause. Edward, Dean of Phoenix House, smiled and gestured toward the Phoenix table. Anlomir hurried to take his place, already hoping his elf friend Aranir might join him. The names kept coming. Ida Buttercup, a girl from Bree City, hopped onto the stool. The hat barely touched her head when it cried, "Thunderbird House." Blushing and delighted, Ida skipped to the Thunderbird table as the crowd clapped. Brandy, Dragon House, Beth, Basilisk House. One by one, the 107 new students were sorted. 65 came from Dewey's territory, young wizards, 33 were elves, and only 9 were Dunedain. The wizards were fairly evenly spread across the 4 houses. The Dunedain, however, tended to be placed in Phoenix House for courage and Dragon House for guardianship. The elves clustered mostly in Thunderbird House, the House of Wisdom, but regional tendencies appeared. Elves from Rivendell leaned toward Thunderbird, those from Lothlorien toward Dragon, Mirkwood elves toward Basilisk. Likewise, Noldor favored Thunderbird, Sindar leaned Basilisk, and Sylvan often went to Dragon. Watching from the professors' seats, Professor Alpha looked puzzled. "Principal Duir," he said, addressing Dewey, "the sorting hat says Phoenix is courage, Thunderbird wisdom, Basilisk shrewdness, but how is Dragon associated with loyalty? Dragons are supposed to be cunning and greedy." The other professors turned to Dewey with similar curiosity. Dewey replied with a wry smile, "Well, at least dragons are terribly loyal to their treasure." Laughter rippled through the hall. After all, a dragon's devotion to its hoard was famous enough. When the last student had been placed, the sorting ceremony concluded. Edward waved his wand and the 3-legged stool vanished. He took the hat and handed it to Dewey with respectful formality. "Sir, the sorting ceremony is complete. The sorting hat is now in your care." "Thank you, Edward," Dewey said, returning the courtesy with a gentle smile. "From now on, call me Professor. You're a dean yourself. No need for such formality." "Understood, Professor," Edward said obediently. He then sat in the empty seat to Dewey's left and tapped his cup with a spoon. The single clear sound drew the hall to attention. "Silence, please, for the principal's speech." Conversations died. All eyes turned to the figure in the central chair. Chapter 331, Opening Banquet. Everyone knew that their being here today and being admitted to the School of Magic was thanks to the young-looking principal. That was especially true for the young wizards from the territories, who had grown up on stories of the Lord and whose parents spoke of him with reverence. Having heard those tales all their lives, the newcomers shared that respect. Dewey stood and looked down at the students with a gentle, kind gaze. His voice was quiet, but carried to every ear. "Welcome, welcome everyone, to Hogwarts. A new school year begins." He smiled. "Before the feast, I have a few announcements. First years, the grove of silverleaf trees outside the grounds is off limits. Also, unless there are exceptional circumstances, students are not allowed down the mountain to Hogsmeade on weekends. Only in your third year, and only with parental permission, may you visit Hogsmeade on weekends. Quidditch tryouts will be held in the second week of term. If you want to try out for your house team, speak to Professor Gandalf." The mention of Quidditch made the young wizards from the territories sit up and glow with excitement. The elves and Dunedain children, who had never heard of the game, looked puzzled at first, but after classmates explained, they too grew eager. At the faculty table, Professor Gandalf waved cheerfully when Dewey mentioned him, grinning like an old prankster. "One more thing," Dewey said, his face growing serious. "Do not disturb the sleeping dragon. If you value your lives and don't want a painful end, do not try to open the door next to the dungeons. Dragon Smog's fire awaits trespassers." The first years fell silent. Tales had long circulated that a dragon slept beneath the castle, guarding untold treasure, a dragon that had once laid waste to the dwarf halls until the Lord finally subdued it. They knew such a creature was not to be trifled with. Though children are naturally curious, curiosity does not equal foolishness. None of them wanted to die for the sake of a thrill. Dewey watched the wide-eyed students and allowed himself the smallest smile. His warning was meant to put them in their place. In any case, the door was magically sealed by him. No one could open it without a special key and command. Even if someone did breach the entrance, Smog would likely only roar and frighten them, not slaughter them outright. "All right, the feast begins," Dewey announced. He raised a golden goblet, and the next instant, sumptuous dishes appeared across the tables. Gasps rippled through the hall as platters, pies, roasts, and bowls of steaming food manifested before incredulous eyes. At the Phoenix House table, Anlamir sat with the young elf Aranir, and beside them was Adam Bailey from Hogsmeade. Adam, ever proud to be a subject of the principal, took it upon himself to look after his new tablemates, Anlamir of the Dunedain and Aranir from Rivendell. He chewed on a chicken leg and beamed. "My dad will be thrilled I got into Phoenix House," Adam said. "He says the principal's animagus is the only phoenix in all of Middle-earth. So our house is literally represented by the principal's phoenix form. It's practically a direct lineage." Anlamir and Aranir frowned in confusion. "Animagus? What's that?" they asked. Adam only half understood it himself. "I don't really know either. My dad says it's beyond normal explanation. It's a very advanced transfiguration that lets someone turn into an animal. Only the most skilled in transfiguration become registered animagi. Apparently the principal's is a phoenix. Most people's animagi are ordinary animals. Oh, and Professor Edward, he did the sorting. He's our house dean. I heard he's a registered animagus too, but nobody knows what animal he turns into." Hearing that, Anlamir and Aranir were even more amazed. Magic that lets you become an animal, that was genuinely wondrous. The three of them quickly warmed to each other and began trading stories about their families. Across the hall, other students were doing the same, chats and laughter filling the tables. The young elves, with their flawless faces and graceful manners, were particularly popular. Though many of them were actually centuries old, their childlike appearance, small and delicate, made classmates fuss over them. When the plates were empty, the food vanished and the tables gleamed clean. Dewey rose again and with a flick of his wand sent a fluttering ribbon into the air. Shimmering words appeared along it. "Everyone, sing the school song in whatever tune you like. Ready? Beat begin." Dew called, amusement in his voice. The children stared at the odd lyrics and then burst into a chaotic chorus. Even with the elves' pure voices, the result was a musical train wreck. "Hogwarts, Hogwarts, teach us all your lore. Whether we are bald old men or children with skinned knees, open our minds to all the wondrous things, for now our heads are empty, filled with air, dead flies and trifles. Teach us something worthy. Restore what we've forgotten. You do your part. The rest is on us. We'll study hard until we turn to dust." They sang in different keys, talking over one another, giggling and improvising. The professors at the high table watched with a mixture of amusement and exasperation, Gandalf, Galadriel, and Arwen among them, recognizing Dewey's mischievous hand in it. But as the singing swelled, something unexpected happened. A subtle, deep magical vibration began to hum through the castle, so faint only those with advanced sensitivity could perceive it. The hall, the roofs, the stones themselves seemed to listen and respond. The castle formed an invisible bond with the students, something like a contract. The castle would keep every student safe, and in return, it would draw upon the children's overflowing magic and the flux of their emotions. Dewey felt it most keenly. He could sense the students' feelings and surplus power pooling in hidden places within the walls, slowly nourishing something. He thought, with a small private wonder, that perhaps when the time was right, this castle would give birth to a spirit, a true living heart for Hogwarts. Chapter 332, College. After the school anthem, Dewey announced the end of the feast and dismissed the students in an orderly fashion. With no older students present, the four house deans rose from the professor's table and led their houses back to the common rooms. Students of Phoenix House, please follow me. Thunderbird House, don't fall behind. Up the stairs. Dragon House, Basilisk House. The dean's voices rang out in turn, cutting through the students' chatter. The other professors said their goodbyes to Dewey and Arwen and returned to their offices. Lady Galadriel and Gandalf walked together. Both of them lived in one of the Maolong tree houses in the garden. Dewey held Arwen's arm carefully as they strolled down the narrow corridor toward Amon Sul, their private quarters where only close friends like Galadriel and Gandalf usually gathered. Arwen gently touched her slightly rounded belly and smiled. Duir, with all these children around, the castle feels so alive. It's wonderful. Dewey supported her more firmly, shaking his head. I only hope they don't trouble you. Arwen was almost 2 years pregnant and wasn't due for another year. If she hadn't insisted, Dewey would never have let her take the history of magic post. He worried about her and the child. Still, she loved the children's laughter. Of course not. I love hearing them. They bring so much energy to the castle. She felt his concern, and although a little amused by his protectiveness, she didn't want to alarm him further. Elves have strong constitutions. Even pregnant, Arwen could leap and fight as well as any. But she agreed to let her grandmother Galadriel share the heavier teaching load and to pace herself. Elsewhere, the new first years followed their deans like a flock of ducklings. Phoenix and Thunderbird houses were above ground, reached by layers of moving staircases. Phoenix House sat on the 8th floor. Its common room entrance was a portrait of a beautiful sylvan elf maiden, Nimrodel, after whom Lothlorien's stream is named. Legend says Nimrodel once sang beneath a waterfall. Her love story with Amroth is both beautiful and tragic. In the painting before them, painted by Arwen and enchanted with false memories, the elf maiden resembled the song's Nimrodel. She opened her painted eyes and asked for the password. When Professor Edward answered, she bowed with elegant courtesy, and the hidden entrance swung open. Inside, Phoenix House's common room was spacious and comfortable. Soft red carpets, golden red sofas, phoenix motifs on the walls and ceiling, and a large hearth that kept the room warm. A family of fire salamanders nested in the flames. Dean Edward introduced the house briefly and handed out timetables before leaving. The well-fed first years, sleepy in the cozy heat, yawned as they climbed the dormitory stairs. The Dunedain on Lemire, the little elf Aranir, and the young wizard Adam Bailey found themselves in the same dorm and chatted quietly about the day's wonders until drowsiness settled in. Thunderbird House occupied a tower, the highest dormitories of the 4 houses. Its entrance was a heavy door with a Thunderbird knocker that demanded an answer to a riddle before it opened. Inside, the common room was blue. A ceiling like a starry sky and a vast window that looked out over the whole castle. A Maolong branch even stretched past the window as an outdoor terrace. Dragon and Basilisk houses lay underground. Dragon House required walking down a long corridor on the first floor to a stone dragon statue near the kitchens. The statue, carved to look like it slept curled about itself, guarded a small hole in the wall. Tap the name Smaug rhythmically on its head with a wand, and the dragon would shift aside to reveal a stairwell. Tap wrong, and it would spray a jet of water, soaking the offender. Anyone attempting to break in would face a much fiercer defense. The statue could spew flame and swing its massive tail. The passage led down a narrow stair to the first subterranean level, where Dragon House's common room, yellow and black and cave-like, welcomed its students. A portrait of Smaug hung on the wall. He was proud to shelter the house that bore his name and affectionately called the students his little dragon whelps. Basilisk House lay deeper still. A long flight of stairs descended beneath the castle to a circular stone door set with a silver snake holding 2 emeralds. The snake seemed alive, flicking its tongue and hissing. Give the password, and the door opened into a luxuriously furnished common room, silver and green, warmed by a constantly burning hearth so that the basement felt cozy rather than cold. The dormitories were even lower, almost touching the Black Lake. Through crystal windows, students could watch schools of fish drift past, and sometimes catch sight of the enormous shape of the lake's kraken gliding by. Chapter 333, First Lesson of the New Semester. The next morning the sun rose bright and clear. Its light struck the castle and caught on the golden malong trees and silver-white foliage, bathing the grounds in a wash of gold and silver, so vivid it felt sacred. A breeze carried the sweet scents of grass and blossom through the dormitories, gently waking the new students from a night of pleasant dreams. Bleary-eyed, they drew back their curtains and gasped at the view outside. Any lingering sleep vanished at once. "It's beautiful," Anlamir of Phoenix House breathed. Even Aranir, the young elf who had lived at Rivendell since childhood, nodded in appreciation. After washing and dressing, the new students gathered in the great hall for breakfast. By the time they finished, it was almost 9, and Anlamir, Aranir, and Adam Bailey hurried toward the Transfiguration classroom, their first class of the semester, shared with students from Dragon House. They reached the classroom just before the bell and took their seats. When the bell rang, the room buzzed with the restlessness of new students, until a massive shape padded through the doorway on all fours. The students in the back turned to look, then went pale. A soundless panic spread as they stared at a wolf-like creature as tall as a man, black along its back, white on its belly, with thick, powerful limbs that at first glance made it seem like a warg. The giant wolf strode down the aisle to the front, and in an instant its form shifted. Where the wolf had stood now stood Professor Edward. A ripple of shocked gasps swept the room. For a moment, the students could hardly believe their eyes. Only Adam Bailey recovered quickly enough to shout with a mix of disbelief and admiration, "That's an animagus! Professor Edward's animagus is a wolf. So cool!" Those who had heard of animagi understood immediately. Others listened as the realization was explained to them, their faces turning from confusion to awe. Edward saw Adam's voice and let a smile flash across his face, then lifted a hand and called for silence. The chatter died away, but the students remained visibly unsettled. Edward's tone grew firm. "Quiet. Mr. Bailey is correct. Animagus is one of the highest achievements in Transfiguration. It allows a wizard to transform into an animal at will, useful for disguise or for adapting to certain environments." He paced once across the front of the classroom. "However," he continued, voice hardening, "Transfiguration is a dangerous subject. A moment's carelessness can lead to irreversible magical accidents. Very few ever master animagus. To this day, only 5 people have successfully achieved it." His words sobered the room like a splash of cold water. The initial thrill faded into nervous attention. A brave hand went up. "Professor, who are the other animagi?" Edward didn't rush into the lesson. He recognized curiosity as an opportunity to teach and to inspire proper respect for the art. "There are 4 animagi registered with the Ministry of Magic besides myself," he said. "You probably know one of them, our principal. Her animagus form is a phoenix." At the mention of the principal, Edward's voice softened with reverence. "A phoenix is a magnificent, sacred creature. It is reborn from its own ashes, controls fire, has tears that heal all wounds, and a song that can instill courage and repel the dark. It is, in many ways, a perfect being." A collective murmur of awe swept the students. Edward raised a hand for order. "Generally, animagus transformation is limited to ordinary animals, wolves, birds, reptiles. Attempts to force a transformation into a magical creature are dangerous and often irreversible. So do not expect to become a phoenix like the principal." He fixed them with a steady look. "If any of you are interested in animagus, when you reach advanced transfiguration, you may apply to me. You may practice under my supervision or under another professor's. But the rule is absolute, no private practice. I will not have any of you experimenting on your own." Then, leaning back, he addressed their curiosity directly. "Of the other registered animagi, one you already know, your defense against the dark arts Professor Brog. His animagus is a falcon, the only animagus besides the principals known to be able to fly well." "And the remaining one?" someone asked. Edward smiled slightly. "Mr. Bill Ollivander, the wandsmith. His animagus is a chameleon." Edward spoke openly about their colleagues' animagi as if the information were common knowledge. In fact, it was. After their animagus transformations, Edward, Brog, and Bill had registered with the ministry. But there was more to the story, an explanation for why Edward could openly discuss them. After completing Animagus, some witches and wizards have been able to evolve their animal forms with assistance, Edward explained. With the help of Dewey, Animagi can sometimes develop advanced magical animal forms. For example, while my ordinary Animagus is a wolf dog, my evolved form is a giant wolf. Both exist, meaning I possess two Animagus forms. Dewey helped me evolve it. He paused so the astonished faces could take that in. Dewey helped others as well. Although the principal completed a phoenix Animagus, she can still become an owl. Brog's base form is a falcon. His evolved form is a giant eagle. Smaller than true giant eagles, but still very powerful. Bill's Animagus may have seemed the weakest at first, a small chameleon, but with Dewey's help it evolved into a fire-breathing wyvern, not as large as a true dragon, but a formidable creature in its own right. Edward let the room imagine the three faculty members in those forms. So on the surface their Animagi appear as a wolf dog, a falcon, and a lizard. In truth, they are a giant wolf, a giant eagle, and a wyvern, powerful magical creatures. All three are among the strongest wizards who trained under Dewey. The students sat in stunned silence, images of giant beasts and a phoenix filling their minds. For many, fear had been replaced by a fierce curiosity. For others, a new respect for the dangers of transfiguration settled in. Edward surveyed them, satisfied that the lesson's first impression had been made. Animagus was no mere parlor trick, but a discipline that demanded skill, caution, and the right guidance. Chapter 334, First Week of School. In Transfiguration, after briefly touching on Animagi, Professor Edward began his lesson in earnest. He spent the first half of the class on theory, then waved his wand and produced a match for each student, setting them to practice turning the matchsticks into needles. By the time the bell rang, only a handful of students had managed even a partial transfiguration. Edward wasn't surprised. Transfiguration was one of the most difficult subjects, and a few successes exceeded his expectations. He assigned homework and dismissed them. First-year mornings were light, transfiguration only. Afternoons, however, held charms and herbology. The charms professor was Luke, once the mayor of Hogsmeade, who had retired from politics to pursue teaching at the castle. Luke had quietly groomed a successor during his mayoralty, and when that successor gained Dewey's approval, Luke handed over most administrative duties and devoted himself to mastering deeper magic. That dedication raised more than a few eyebrows. His old rival Ratch was particularly stunned and privately bitter. Unlike some, Luke had little taste for power. He preferred to teach and to learn. Luke was also the dean of Thunderbird House. His classes had a relaxed, humorous tone. He taught through demonstration and entertainment, scattering elegant charms amid the dry theory to keep students engaged. Even after class ended, pupils lingered in small groups, still talking excitedly about the displays he'd shown. When charms let out, the first years hurried down and out to greenhouse number 1. The greenhouses sat just outside Dewey and Arwen's private garden, separated by a tall, dense hedge. When the school was founded, Dewey had ordered a living wall planted around the garden and enchanted to grow thick and tall, keeping curious children out. The garden held 2 prized trees, the white tree and the malong tree, and a number of rare plants that couldn't survive rough handling, so access was strictly limited to Dewey, Arwen, and those they allowed. Outside the hedge, 7 glass greenhouses were arranged in sequence. The higher the number, the rarer or more dangerous the plants inside. The old herbology room in Amon Sul Tower had become Dewey's private medicinal garden, separate from the public greenhouses. All the greenhouses were cared for by Professor Margals, who had been one of the witches from the first magic crash course. Dewey had noticed her talent, and, after graduation, she stayed on to manage his gardens. Over the last decade, her research and skill had advanced enormously. She had collected seeds from Mirkwood, Fangorn, and the Old Forest, won the friendship of Radagast the Brown, of some wood elves, and even of Ents, and had imported plants most people only read about. She had even transplanted a Huorn willow from Fangorn into Greenhouse 7, a feat that had impressed Dewey greatly. Margals was a plump, cheerful woman with brown hair and blue eyes, usually seen in a serviceable brown dress and a hat flecked with dust. She radiated warmth and simple honesty, but underneath she nursed ambitious plans to cultivate more white trees and malong trees and to turn Weathertop into a forest as breathtaking as Lothlorien, and to explore ways for the Ents to reproduce again after the disappearance of the Entwives. Dewey supported those goals. Finding a way for the Ents to reproduce would secure their friendship, and that alone was worth the effort. Greenhouse 1 had already been prepared when the Phoenix and Thunderbird first years arrived. Expanded by undetectable extension charms and held at a steady climate by permanent warming charms, the interior was the size of a football pitch. Because it served first years, it housed mostly harmless plants, the most prevalent of which was a vast patch of Dittany, the subject of the day's herbology lesson. Dittany's healing properties were famed. Its sap could be distilled into Dittany essence to mend most wounds, and many wizarding families kept small bottles at home. Margal's yield, however, was on another scale. Her Dittany essence was sold in Diagon Alley and exported, a quietly lucrative enterprise. She was, in effect, an invisible millionaire, though she spent her riches on experiments and gardening rather than luxury. Margal's had applied her botanical expertise to combat as well as cure. She had coaxed a dangerous dark vine, killing vine, mutated by shadow, in Mirkwood, and refined it into several forms of devil's snare. One version she cultivated kept the classic weakness to light and fire, deliberately preserved so the plant would not become uncontrollable. Another, painstakingly bred and tougher, was impervious to sunlight and flame, with tenacious vines that few things could escape. That variant she kept strictly as a defensive plant, a tool to be used only by those who understood it. As the students gathered among the rows of Dittany, Margal's greeted them with that sunny smile, hands already stained with sap, ready to teach them the first of many lessons about the plants that supported their world, both the gentle and the dangerous.